Good afternoon and welcome to all of you who are here with us in person at the Iowa City Public Library, and to those of you joining us via live stream, welcome to you as well to this afternoon's program featuring Rosalind Grant, Carolyn Van Meter, Martha Durr, Bill Gutowski, and Linda Schenk, presenting on the topic of fostering climate resilience together. My name is Catherine Lisansky. I am a board member for the Iowa City Foreign Relations Council and your host for today's program. As a reminder, we expect this program to conclude about 1:15 p.m. today. This is our 6th program in our spring of 2020-25 lineup, and we're in the midst of a 4-part series, The Changing Environment, Adaptation, Resiliency, and Sustainability, of which today's session is obviously a piece of. More information about the series is available on our website and on your tables at the table tents. I want to start by saying how grateful we are for each of you for being part of this community. This is an organization that has long been supported by the Iowa City community, and your help has allowed our organization to grow for more than 41 years. Hosting speaker programs with experts who have joined us both in person and online from across the world. As a small nonprofit, we exist solely because of the generosity and engagement of each and every one of you. As we head into 2025, opportunities for organizations and nonprofit funding beyond individuals is becoming more and more difficult as charitable organizations like ours face an uncertain future, especially those that are focused on uplifting research and stories that advocate for marginalized, vulnerable, and international communities. I hope each of you will consider supporting our organization. I know many of you have already. There are opportunities to do so with cash or check contributions at the door. There are QR codes on each of your table and in the hallway, and our website has opportunities to do that online as well. This support allows us to keep our programming free throughout the future. We would like to, at this moment, thank many of our sponsors and partners for today's event, including the Anthropology Department at the University of Iowa, the Office of Sustainability and the Environment, the Center for Human Rights, international programs and international studies, as well as Frontier Co-op, 100 Grannies, I know a few of them are here today, Newman Munson Architects, Midwest One Bank, and the City of Iowa City's Human Rights Commission, and of course our wonderful hosts, the Iowa City Public Library. They are generous enough to provide this partnership, space, and today's food. We thank each of you for your support. Our next program will be Friday, April 11th at 12 noon here at the Iowa City Public Library and online. That program is entitled When Archives Meet Authoritarianism. Despite all of the caveats about how much we do not know about the records practices of authoritarian governments, it is clear that they directly affect archives in a number of distinct ways, greatly increasing the production of some documentation and creating political climates that lead to self-censorship, production, and documentation. Therefore, lacking of records creation and withholding of the release of records and tightly controlled access to archives. The continued public unmasking of authoritarian practices by journalists and researchers create important resources for those committed to a freer and more open view of the past. I hope you will join us for that program. Please feel free to see our website, ICFRC.org, for the rest of the spring lineup. With that, I will turn it over to Linda, who's going to get us started and have the speakers introduce themselves. Linda?
Thanks so much, Catherine. And as Catherine has said, I also would like to thank you for coming tonight. It's really lovely to see you and to hear about all of the programs. I have long been an admirer. I am from Ames. But I have long been an admirer of the programs and certainly thank the Iowa City Foreign Relations Council for letting us be here today to share some of the work, the collaborative work that we all do together, and certainly also thanks to the Iowa City Public Library. So just really thank you to all of you, and thank you all for being here It's really lovely. And at the end, we're really going to have a chance to be able all to be sharing what is some of the work, what are some of the ideas and things that we're all doing together here to kind of think about climate resilience. So just be ready for the fact that there'll be a Q&A time, but there'll also be time for us all to be kind of gathering our knowledge of opportunities together as well. So just stay tuned for that. Okay. So I will introduce, you can see up here on our picture, that there are 5 of us that are going to be presenting today. You look up here, you see 3. I will be occasionally going over and into Zoom. We have two of our team who are going to be sharing on Zoom. They are in Nebraska, and they will be sharing from Nebraska. So you'll see me kind of toggling between those 2. The 5 of us are all collaborators on a much larger project that is called the Central Midwest Climate Opportunities and Learning Project. You see the image up there, which we call the Co-Learn Project. And it is for the region of the Central Midwest that's part of the NOAA project, their program, the Climate Adaptation Partnerships program. And you can see both of those up there. So as promised, Catherine promised, we will introduce ourselves. I will start here in just a minute by introducing myself. But before I do that, I would like to emphasize that our Co-Learn team, it is a regional team, and the lead PI, or principal investigator on the entire thing, is actually right here in this room, and it is not me, and that is Brandy Jansen, and she's right here. She's with the College of Public Health. So thank you, Brandy. She is the lead of the entire 4-state project, and I'll be giving more details about the project soon. And then also, Sarah is here too, Sarah Helmer, who is our project manager. So both really kind of key leaders and collaborators on this project. So I am Linda Schenk. I am at Iowa State University. I'm in the Department of English. So yes, I'm a humanist, and I do work on collaborative storytelling. How do we leave space in our stories to allow others to come into the story and join it with us, rather than we just tell stories to each other? I am a Shakespeare professor by background and training, so that is my background. And I am one of the leads on the larger project. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to turn this over to Zoom. I'm going to toggle over now, and we're going to have introducing themselves Martha Durr and Rosalind. So I'll turn it over to the 2 of you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Martha Durr. I am a faculty at Nebraska Indian Community College. We are a school in the northeast corner of Nebraska. We serve the Omaha and the Santee Nations and all learners, in fact. I come to you from Lincoln, Nebraska. That's where I live. I grew up in the North Carolina mountains, so that's where my roots are, and that's where I call home. I am a meteorologist by training, and I've been an applied climatologist in different geographies from Alaska to the Great Plains for the last 22 years. And I'm really excited to be at Nebraska Indian Community College and to be working with Rosalind, who I will embarrass her and say that she is the Student of the Year for NICC. And I'm so grateful to work with her and work with this great team, including Linda and Brandy and Sarah, and to have a climate adaptation partnership in the middle of the country. These programs have been around for a long time, but we've not had one in the central US, so I'm really happy for that. So thank you, and I will turn it over to Rosalind.
Greetings. Let me introduce myself. My name is Rosalind Grant in my Omaha language. I am part of the Omaha tribe and the Winnebago tribe of Nebraska. I currently attend NICC as a student, and I will be graduating this May and jumping right back into school for their Indigenous Environmental Health bachelor's program. And yeah, that's everything about me. Thank you for having me on this panel today.
Thank you, Martha. Thank you, Rosalind. It's really lovely to have you. And yes, Rosalind, to make sure everyone heard that, you are indeed the NICC Student of the Year. which is really, yes, thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
I'm going to leave them up on Zoom for the next few minutes, and now I'm going to turn over to Carolyn, who's joining us also as a collaborator.
So I grew up in western Iowa, Guthrie County. I went to graduate school here in Iowa City, but then I left for a long time. I have a tax practice, and I currently live in North Carolina. However, around 15 years ago, I bought back into my family farm, and I became involved in trying to figure out what to do. So with that farm, to just take good care of the land and make some good decisions. So currently, I'm involved with a group of other, a very small group, there are 5 of us, I think, women landowners. We were slow to find each other. It has taken us quite a while, and it's through a number of different projects and groups and where we kept crossing paths. And finally, one of them probably saw where we could get involved with this program. We are currently trying to basically vet speakers who can help us figure out a way that on larger tracts of Iowa farmland that are currently growing corn and soybeans, what can we do? How can we actually grow food? Because I think you've heard the comment, people fly over whatever, you see all this farmland, and then it's like, we can't really, it's not edible food directly. So we are in the process of figuring out how could we go about it. So we're vetting speakers to help us with the financial part of that, with the marketing, with the just whether it makes sense or not question. It's just wonderful to have a group where we can explore possibilities. So I probably was still just supposed to introduce myself, but that's how that came about, because that's why I'm here. But it's nice that I could be here again. I loved coming back to Iowa City, so.
Yep, Bill.
Then I'll just, yeah, all right. Yeah, I'm Bill Gutowski, and like Linda, I come from that university over in the middle part of the state, but my daughter got 2 degrees here from the University of Iowa, and I've long been familiar with Iowa City, and it certainly is always nice to come back to Iowa City in many ways. My department is the Department of the Earth, Atmosphere, and Climate, and my background is in doing climate research over many years that involved very basic research about the climate system and weather. In more recent years, I've become more and more engaged with how you reach out to the broader community on those issues. And so it's been, for me, just a lot of interesting fun to be working with the folks on this NOAA project, which is very broadly interdisciplinary, even transdisciplinary is the term nowadays. And along the lines, in all of this, I've also been very much engaged with the global community over the years. I have, as I'll say a little bit more later perhaps, I've been involved with IPCC reports, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and also something called the World Climate Research Program, all of which has had me engaged with and working with people from around the world. And in fact, as a little side note, I do have an honorary professorship with the University of Cape Town in South Africa because of all that work. So, yeah.
Perfect. So Martha and Rosalind, I'm gonna switch back to the PowerPoint. I'm just going to give 2 quick slides to give you a sense of the larger project. You see there's 5 of us here. We're part of a larger team of collaborators across 4 states. As you can see, Iowa, Kansas, Nebraska, and Missouri. That involves researchers from multiple institutions that you can see up there, as well as a range of community partners. Our focal communities that we work with are women landowners like Carolyn, and then also tribal nations. And so with those, we all are coming together, so we have different community partners. You can see them kind of listed around. We have the Center for Rural Affairs, American Farmland Trust, the Women Food and Ag Network, eResources, the Climate, Midwest Climate Hub, for example, are just one of, those cluster are some of just a larger team. So we have this vast network that we are building as part of this project. And as you can see, there's the leadership team up there with Brandy and Martha and me. And we also have as part of our leadership team, Gabriele Villarini, and there you see Sarah, also as our heroic program manager. At the center of our project, as well as the larger Climate Adaptation Partnerships program that is NOAA program, are these principles. We're pulling this from NOAA. But I really want to kind of pull out these three areas that are really at the heart of the work that we do. And you'll hear kind of threaded throughout the different ways that we'll talk about our collaborations. So at the heart of this are collaborative partnerships among communities and researchers, usable support that fosters decisions for action, and also the emphasis on building capacities and readiness for climate resilience. So with those ideas in mind, today's discussion, because it's a panel discussion, we're all going to be sharing how we are kind of collaborating together. We're going to have three kind of main areas that we'll talk about, how we collaborate as different partners coming from very different backgrounds and why we collaborate, how we're building climate resilience, and then how this work connects to work going on globally, to work that folks here in this room and online are doing. And so that last part, how this work connects, we'll share some ideas and resources, but we're also going to be then really turning this outward to you all to talk about the kinds of things that you're doing as well. So I am going to move to how we collaborate and why. And so what I'd like to do is I'll go back to Zoom, and I'd like to start with Rosalind and Martha talking a little bit about how they're parts of collaboration and why they're collaborating. And I'm going to shift now down to being more just of a fellow panelist who's going to be occasionally moderating. So I'll be in and out, but now I'll try to sit down here. So thanks, Martha.
Great, thanks, Linda. For me, the key to collaboration is developing and deepening a relationship. This leads to better understanding of worldviews and values. When we share values, that's when we can truly collaborate for everyone's benefit. For me, a relationship with tribal communities began in about 2009 for here in the Plains. I participated in tribal engagement training that NOAA offered. I showed up at Indigenous-led meetings and conferences, showed up at their table rather than expecting these communities to come to my table. Spent time hearing and listening and learning from these individuals and communities. Although this takes time to foster, for me, it's an essential step, and it really forms the basis of how we collaborate. I consider Rosalind a good friend, even though I've known her for about a year and a half. So fortunate to know and learn from her and support her vision and goals for her community. As a tribal college educator and a researcher, I try and constantly ask myself these questions. What is my intent and why am I doing this? And if that aligns with what Rosalind and her community wants, then I keep going. So for me, it's all about relationship when I think of collaboration. So I will turn it over to you, Rosalind.
Thank you for that, Martha. So how I view collaboration is bringing my Indigenous knowledge system to the table. This is something that I've been advocating for, and the tribal college provides a seat at the table for blending Indigenous science with Western science to help come up with solutions for community resilience. Dr. Martha Durr has taught me that relationship building is very important, Gaining trust and friendships with the community brings out the best outcome for resilience as tribal people. Like for an example, for the Omaha tribe and Winnebago tribe, climate does not stop at a political boundary. Broadening our view allows us to solve environmental issues more holistically and as we come together of shared values and shared land. And that's how I see how collaboration, or that's how me and Martha figure out the best ways to collaborate. Thank you.
Thanks, Rosalind and Martha. Carol, I'm going to turn this over to you while I switch back to the PowerPoint.
It's, you know, as we hear what other people are doing, who we haven't met, I've met a few of them, but we are, you know, in different places. I'm very aware, and as are the other women who are in this small group that I'm involved with, that we have the responsibility and the care of land right now. And I think that is one of the top priorities in all of our gatherings, or when we really sit back and think about it. We feel very responsible. We are very aware that it was not our land to start with, but we fell into it, whether we inherited it or bought it, purchased it, and then we want to do the right thing with it. So that's why we're probably trying to be very sensitive to what other people are thinking about it, and how they see us as we own land and what we're doing with it. And it's a slow process. I think one of the things I came away with in preparing for this was I would like to ask your patience as we try to figure out how to make change with the land and how to do it carefully and in the right way. We don't want to just do something very quickly that won't work or that will cause harm. So what we're focused on soil health and water quality, and you know, those are and how to go about making these changes. So is that, yeah.
And so I'll just share a little bit too that in terms of how I collaborate and why, I have learned a great deal from working with Carolyn and other women landowners. Researchers, we have, you know, as a researcher, we have our own ideas. We've done all this research. We've spent this time really thinking about things. But there's a certain aspect of local knowledge that we need as researchers. And not only that, but I've learned a great deal from, that we're hearing too from like Martha, and we're hearing from Rosalind as well, is this emphasis on relationships. I have seen a great deal about how the women landowners work through relationships and how they work to care for each other and care for the land at the same time. And then working to think about what do I have and know and bring as a researcher that can help not necessarily just bring information, but can support their care for the land as part of the climate resilience. And so that's been a real key part of why I collaborate, is because I've learned a great deal from Carolyn. In fact, Carolyn was one of the women landowners that I got to work with very early on in this process. And I was really excited to, when the women themselves looked over the drafts of an article that I wrote for you know, a journal, and they gave me feedback. No, Linda, it's not like that. It's like this. Oh, okay. And so not only was I learning all throughout the program with them, but then also learning from them as I put together a research article. And so and then continuing to kind of work on pieces where I emphasize that, yes, I bring expertise, but frankly, so do the landowners themselves, and it's something that we need to listen to as well. So this idea of communities and researchers pulling together, which is something I do a lot with storytelling. And so that is at the center of what I do, is researchers, there's a lot of emphasis in science on how do we tell a better story? How can be more persuasive? And that's necessary and important. But if we're gonna bring in individuals to kind of learn with each other, co-learn, that's our program name, we then need to find, so what I do in my work is how do we leave space in a story for others to make a story with us. So the work and the stories that I bring from research become a way to listen to the stories of Carolyn and the work that she's doing and things that she's thinking about, and how do we bring those stories together to foster action. And I'll talk more about the role of action projects in our larger project later, but I want to turn this over to Bill.
I would say that Martha, Rosalind, Carolyn, and Linda have already touched upon various points that I would have made as well about relationship, fostering trust. I would add to that, Linda mentioned listening. And to me, that's been an important thing for me to learn over the past several years, because as Linda said, we're not really trained as academic researchers to listen to other people. We're trained to go out there and tell people what we know, and by golly, people are going to pay attention to us and want to know what we know. So it's a real challenge for academic researchers like myself to say, oh yeah, no, I've got to listen. I've got to listen, hear what's missing that I don't know about. What are these gaps that Linda talked about? And recognizing the authority of our partners that we're working with, that it's not just all about this academic authority, but everything else that goes on. And in doing that, trying to help work with them to fill in gaps of understanding. And that has really guided a lot of my, what you might call climate research, my physical science research in recent years, because of that listening and deciding what I want to focus on. And maybe Linda can go to this next slide.
She can.
Here. This is an example of something that we've been doing that comes out of our interactions with the farming community and understanding what is important to the farming community. This is just one small example, but the notion is, what do we want to focus on? We want to focus on impactful events. And these are not always the things that academic researchers have focused on. They've tended to focus on these really, rare events, something like that. But what's impactful for farming? Well, one of them is just crop heat stress. And it starts to come on at temperatures that exceed 86 degrees Fahrenheit, 30 degrees Celsius. And that's clearly not a super hot kind of condition, but it starts to come on and affect the crops. And so we were looking especially at 5-day episodes where you start to get that heat stress coming on and asking, how often does that occur? Another factor here is short-term drought. Sometimes you might have heard people use the word flash drought, although there's various definitions of that. But relatively short periods where there's hardly any rain, but if it comes at the wrong time of year, can have a serious impact on crop development. And so we've looked at both of these events during a quote season that is April, May, June, and July, which is when these crops are developing and starting to emerge. And looking at a current climate period that I put up there from our data, either from climate simulations or from observations, 1981 to 2000, and then also saying, well, what might the future hold? Looking at a future scenario, which is mid-century, 2041 to 2060. So this is just an example that comes about from listening to our partners, listening to our community, and understanding, okay, what is really important to them? And it's not necessarily the days where you're up in the upper 1% or whatever, but things that are really important, that are impactful for how they go about their livelihood and their lives.
So the next area we want to talk about is how are we building climate resilience? And one of the things that you're hearing is how we as researchers are working to listen. Our community partners, they have things that they know. These are the thresholds that matter to us. These are the kinds of questions that we're having. So part of what we do to co-learn with researchers and communities together is we say, okay, let's not just have information, let's get something done. So we have action projects. I'm going to go back over here for a minute. To my next mic, we have action projects or community action projects, where communities like Carolyn's group has said, we're interested in taking some of the acres that we have in corn and soy, and we want to start thinking about how can we grow food. So we need a little support with that. as we think about this. So we understand what they're thinking about. We are, like, I'm invited to all of their meetings. It's, and so, like, we all get to sort of listen and learn from each other. And so then we, as part of the project, fund some of these community action projects. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some of those as we go through. You're going to hear Rosalind and Martha talk about them here in just a minute. But I just want to let you know that that's a real key foundation of our whole research project, is we have opportunities to fund community action. So we're not just talking about it, we're getting some done. So here we go. So I'm going to turn this over to Martha. No, I'm turning this to Bill.
Oh, all right.
That's right. Whoops, sorry.
Whatever.
Yeah, I think I am. Do you want your first slide, Bill?
Yeah, we should go to the quick view. So we want to,
So this is to give a little context.
but we want to turn down the lights too.
Oh, yeah, sorry. How do we turn the lights back down? Whoever is magically doing that?
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. Okay.
All right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to show you a little bit of some results that we've gotten out of looking at those events that I talked about, with the whole goal being we want to develop meaningful climate information in response to what we're hearing from our partners. What kind of climate stories can we tell them that might be useful for their planning and things like that? And so what's here is, you may not be able to see it, but these are maps of the upper Midwest. If you can, you may not even be able to see the state outlines there, unfortunately, but here is Lake Michigan, so you can start to get a sense of where Iowa is right there. And what's shown here is the frequency that these heat stress events occur, both in observations in the upper left during that growing season period, how they occur in a couple of different climate simulations for that same current climate period, showed in the middle and on the upper right. And you can see that there's a scale down here, but the key thing is the darker the shading, the more frequently these events occur. And you can see that there's some agreement between the observed behavior and what these models simulate. It's not perfect, and that's always a reminder to us that we don't have perfect information about what's going to happen, but we have something that gives us guidance on what might happen. Some of that is because these models are not perfect representations of the real world, as much as we try to make them that. Some of it is because there's noise in the climate system, and the noise shows up in different ways, things that are not, that are always fluctuating. Then on the bottom two rows, there are that future scenario from those two simulations, and you can see that now things have gotten a lot darker. So it's telling us that these heat stress events are going to become much more frequent as we go off into the future. We can go to the next slide. But then I said we were talking about short-term drought and heat stress, and we were wondering, well, what comes first? And what we see here is that the heat stress tends to lead more frequently than droughts, that when these events will occur at the same time sometimes, compounding each other, which has the effect of making them yet stronger. But the heat stress tends to come earlier. That's an important point to keep in mind that I'll come back to in the next slide. So this leads to this question of what is the impact on resilience? What is the relevant information? And so in those climate change figures I showed you, in part, that the drought frequency is going to go up in the future. I didn't show you that, but that was part of it. Heat stress events will cover wider and wider areas. Drought heat stress will be such that the heat stress will tend to precede the drought, that when the heat stress comes on, then you want to start thinking about possibilities of drought. And when they both occur at the same time, that is to say, use the technical term when they compound, they become much more intense than if they were just occurring by themselves. And so a good decision relevant story would be that short-term drought events will become more frequent, but watch for heat stress as a potential precursor, especially because when drought and heat stress are simultaneous, they will both tend to be more intense. So that can start becoming something that people will think about in terms of how they think about the future, what the warning flag should be that they should be looking at.
Thanks, Bill. I'm going to turn this back over to Martha and Rosalind to talk about how they're building climate resilience.
Great. Thanks, Linda. I'll start, and then Rosalind will join. So part of my role at a tribal college is providing a safe and culturally relevant environment in which students can learn. Having that solid foundation of knowledge leads to positive life outcomes. It opens doors to opportunities. When individuals and communities have those opportunities, that builds climate resilience, healthy people, healthy environment. Barriers are significant across Indian country due to colonization. Poverty is high. Access to clean water and basic services are disproportionately low. Health outcomes are poor, yet culture runs deep. Knowledge of the land and relationality to Mother Earth, it's incredibly strong. Resilience and survival are foundational in these communities. Specific work that we're doing at the college and together with Rosalind is having this greater understanding of our environment. It's monitoring and measuring. It's incorporating that into coursework. That's leading to better informed decision making. And as Bill was talking just a bit ago, it made me think of a quote that I heard from Jean Tockley several years ago that always sticks with me, and that's, if we're not matching our observations with these questions, we're missing our mark. Climate planning, embracing oral tradition. We're launching a new bachelor's degree this fall at the college, which Rosalind mentioned, so Indigenous Environmental Health. That incorporates food sovereignty, things like restoring the prairies, management and planning of our resources, tribal nation building. That's another big effort. All of this to help build capacity in our communities. So for me, an understanding of those barriers and using our strengths to overcome them, that's how we're helping to build resilience in these communities. And I'll turn it over to you, Rosalind.
We're also building resilience, climate resilience in our communities is making the connections at a local level, which I've heard, throughout this panel. And I feel like that's the most important part, is because if everybody can get on the same page, then we can all, have great outcomes. Just for a future goal that me and Martha have is creating a climate adaptation plan. And that's another way that we're trying to build resilience. I don't know if you want me to go into further details about that. That's more of what I could think of right now. Martha really touched a great deal of it.
Fantastic. Thanks to both of you. Carolyn, I'm going to turn this over to you to talk about some of the resilience work you've been doing. And I'm going to switch back to the PowerPoint so Martha and Rosalind know that you're not still on screen.
Well, one of the action projects that I was involved with, I had a consultant come out and review my farm. I have creek buffers, which were planted part of a farm program so that we can retain more water in the soil. We focus on keeping the soil healthy and trying not to let as much water run off so that we have it there when we need it. It's not an easy thing to figure out, but that was one of the uses and one of the things that we did. We also pull from each other's experiences. If someone in the group is is a soil health scientist, okay, she just has the answers. If somebody else has been involved in trying to build relationships with farmers to have cover crops and no-till farming, we benefit from that. When we have these creek buffers, we have to burn them off every so many years. So we had one of the other members could come in and tell us how her burn went. And then, the rest of us who had to go forward to do that, we had a better idea what to do. So, and this is all, we're all in different parts of the state. So there's still a lot of common ground. I guess one of the things that I've been able to offer is that I'm an accountant, a tax person. I worked a lot with in the legal world, and a lot of it comes down to whether it makes financial sense or whether you have a good lease or some of those technical things that people who really like to work with science don't really want to have to deal with. But hopefully when we talk about them together, we make them fun. I think that's, that's one of the things that I think of is, oh my word, these all interrelate and we find a way. The other thing I pick up from hearing the Nebraskans speak is some of us have been on this land, our families, I mean, go back generations, and that's one of the things that came out when we first worked with Linda, that we go back, I mean, I know I go back 5 generations, and we do not see this as something we're just temporarily doing. We see it long-term. This is just who we are. This is what we do. This isn't about making money or making a living. It's about taking care of the land and going forward with it. So, you know.
That's gorgeous. So I'll just mention a couple things too. I know with the lights, which is fine, it's a tricky thing to move the lights, but there's actually an image of your buffer right here, Carolyn, in that slide. And then just to emphasize too what Carolyn is talking about, of like how it's this idea of which, in cognitive studies, there's this idea of a cognitive ecology, which I totally love. And it's this idea of like, how do we have many different ways of thinking that all come together to work together? And I love it because like there's a name for it, a cognitive ecology. And so what I also like about what I have learned a great deal is not only, of course, are the researchers part of that cognitive ecology, but the women themselves are part of each other's cognitive ecology. And so some of the images that you see up here are some of the women getting together with another expert. For example, like up in the corner is one of the team project folks, Jean Eels, who's with E-Resources. And she's talking about soil health, soil structure. She's out in the fields with some of the women, and they're actually working to test the soil, to feel it, to know, okay, this is what this looks like if it's healthy or not. And then down here in the lower right-hand corner, there's an image of, speaking of fun, with Carolyn's idea, one of the, and these types of things are funded with these action projects, getting these women together to do these learning circles. And so one of the learning circle groups was getting together over at another one of the women landowners' farms, and all coming together to learn from her. And we actually see her, she's the one in the hat. Well, sorry, there's a lot of hats up here. Right here, and actually, Carolyn, that's you, right? Yes, right there.
In bright yellow.
In bright yellow. All together learning from each other. And so that's also part of what the project goes, is to foster not only research collaboration, but also women learning, or different groups learning from each other as a cognitive ecology. Then the last thing up there, which is something that's happening, again, with a research team working together with communities, and Carolyn is actually one, and we've been working with other women as well, to use a particular mapping, a GIS-based tool called the Agricultural Conservation Planning Framework, which actually gives recommendations for conservation practices on specific land. And so it's something that we do, is we see that as a collaborative space where both the women landowner has her own knowledge and stories of the land, what are the neighbors like around, and then also researchers too with some of those conservation practices. So those are all things that we're doing, and then I'll just share one last kind of result of an action project is another learning circle of women landowners and producers all across Iowa, together coming through and kind of pooling together their collective knowledge of how are some of our seasonal indicators changing, and what are some of the decisions that they make at certain times of the year for their land. Sometimes they grow vegetables. It's a very diverse group. And so all together we came together and came up with this ecological calendar. And when we also, I should emphasize, when the researchers brought our title for what we thought we would call it based on what they said, they're like, no, that sounds too much like an academic study. And they were like, when we live as companions. We're like, okay, that's good. So again, as we all learn from each other. All right, I want to make sure that we keep moving along so we have plenty of time, which we're doing great on time, but I want to make sure that I'm moving this. So now I want to just kind of move us outward into how does some of the work that we're doing also collect to larger type in projects and things going on globally. So I'm going to turn this over now to our last slide, and Bill, I'm going to have you, because you have the most global connections of all of us.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, there's various ways that really all of us connect globally, and maybe I've had the most tightest connections, but I mentioned early on, there's this thing called the World Climate Research Program. It tries to coordinate research around the world, different groups of people in different countries coming together. And it's, for me, one of the great pleasures of my career has been working with people all over the place, and even living for a brief period of time in Africa is part of it. But really just meeting people from everywhere. And that's also part of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. The authorship teams involve people from all over the world, and it's just great to develop friendships, relationships with these people. In both cases, visiting different countries, coming to have a local person show you around, which is always nice. But the fact that we are seeing that there is a collective understanding about what the issues are that face us with regards to climate, recognizing that there are different ways of responding to it, perhaps, based on cultural factors and economic factors, but just being able to come and work together. And one of those specific projects is this thing called Palm Trees, which I got to be careful, I make sure I always remember exactly what the acronym is. This is headed up by somebody who was actually a postdoc with me many years ago at Iowa State University. Now he's at the University of Cape Town in South Africa. But it involves countries, several countries across Africa, which you're not going to be able to see the names, but hopefully you can see that they're highlighted. Palm Tree stands for Pan-African Lens on the Margins, Tackling Risks of Extreme Events. So talking about being on the margins, focusing especially on community groups that are underrepresented, that are especially vulnerable in these different locations across Africa, and trying to work directly with those local communities, just like we're trying to do with our Co-Learn project, really. And so there's a lot that we can learn from each other in the course of doing this, that it's not like we're just here by ourselves with trying to do some nice things, but to recognize that people around the world in various contexts are also trying to do the same thing. And even though there are different cultural differences, and even though there are different economic differences, there's still a lot that we can learn from each other about how the vulnerabilities arise, what are the opportunities. Again, how do you develop that cognitive ecology that Linda was talking about, where there's trust and recognition of the authority that people in those groups bring to the table, that it's not just us telling them what they should be doing, but us coming to understand how they live their lives and how we can work together to do something that's actually truly meaningful and constructive.
I'm going to turn this over to Martha and Rosalind. And just while I'm doing that, I'll just mention that some of the action projects that I didn't mention is that, like, even in that Stories of the Seasons, you saw the ecological calendar, that some of the projects that come out of that local are putting cover crops on for the first time, planting pollinator habitat, planting prairie. And sometimes it's even in an urban location as well as in like prairie strips out there in the field. Sometimes it's even been things like realizing that this whole area is a crucial part of a watershed. And so let's have a watershed ice cream social and get all the folks together to start swapping stories and get to know each other, that we're all connected through our water. So let's start to get to know each other. So there's all kinds of different action projects, neighbors beginning to work together, like on neighboring farms to put in pollinator habitat. These are all things that have come out of action project funding that we've done to create like local tangible action. So I'm going to turn this over to Martha and Rosalind to talk about that local and global.
Yeah, I guess I would just echo what has previously been said. You know, we're all a part of the global society. We share a common home. And so sharing these lessons learned and sharing these stories is really important. It's something I incorporate into my curriculum at the community college. And when it comes to weather, climate, environmental resource management, there are toolkits available online that step through how does somebody adapt to a changing climate given the predicted climate conditions and given the specific community that's involved. And so there's a lot of value and a lot of openness in sharing those lessons learned. And I'll just share a brief story. The last time I was at the library in Iowa City was 10 years ago in 2015, and I was a part of this project where city planners and sustainability directors from 5 different cities in the Midwest came together to talk about how do you plan for a changing climate and what do you implement and what city departments. And so it happens on many different levels and particularly for Indigenous communities. Rosalind, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Just echoing, just also just sharing the work, allowing communities to adopt strategies. As an Indigenous person, I don't want to be closed out and, telling non-Indigenous people like, you can't, practice this because it's not your tradition. I feel like since we share the same values, to come to a goal, we have to be open to sharing our knowledge. So maybe, including Indigenous voices more at a global level, because Indigenous people cover 80% of biodiversity and such things as that. I also think sharing adaptation plans, viewing each other's communities, which I've seen was done for the women landowners. Just viewing communities that are already implementing climate plans, just to, like I said, to adopt those strategies. That's how I think we could connect this globally.
Carolyn, I'll turn this over to you.
Sorry, I'm dead. Thank you.
It's great. It's great. I'm just up here to switch back. Carolyn.
Trying to think what to add next. I mean, if you want to give me a little more direction here, maybe.
What are some things that folks can be doing to be helping to build climate resilience? Do you want Bill to go and then you come back? No, or do you want me to?
I know, boy, it's complicated, isn't it? Yeah. I think I always come up with, please be patient with us. We're trying. It's not easy. And it is not an easy task to take on. I will say it's very complex. It's not boring. It's a huge responsibility. I think a lot of us really feel that responsibility. And what we could ask of others, think twice how you spend your money, how you, if it costs more to buy that local honey or whatever, maybe it's better for, I mean, I'm just winging it here on that one. But think twice before you make a decision or say something, because we really are trying, but it's a long, hard process. And I think I'm going to flub this up in how I say this, but there's this tendency to think that these people are wealthy because they own all this land. A lot of us feel like the land kind of owns us. We are hugely responsible to it, and we're using all of our extra resources to take good care of it. I think I'm kind of repeating myself, but that's only because it's really important. We try very hard to to not go into debt to maintain it, and not abuse the responsibility. How's that? It's a tough one.
So I'll just add a couple things. And Bill, I know you had some specific type things too to kind of mention. I'll just mention one thing that I've learned a great deal too, is that I'll just share, is that sometimes when we run into someone that we think might have a different viewpoint, like a different value system, is that we ask them their story. That we can find our common ground sometimes if we do it that way, because the relational component of this, and that we don't think that we're always trying to persuade someone else, but that if we work to listen to them first. I feel like that's been said a lot, but I just want to emphasize that. That is something that I hear all the time. Well, like absentee landowners only care about the check. Carolyn would be classified as an absentee landowner. And I think we've heard from her story that she cares very deeply. And that she really is being active. And so just I think sometimes we need to kind of look for those places, look for the helpers, I love Mr. Rogers. So that's one thing I want to share. But Bill, you want to share a couple of like some very specific local.
Yeah, there's some things that if you want to be involved in this, one of them is this group called the Citizens Climate Lobby. And their website is citizensclimatelobby.org, so one word. They have branches that are located here in Iowa City, as well as Cedar Rapids and the Quad Cities. You can find all this by going to their website or check with me afterwards if you're not quite sure where to go. And there's other chapters. And they try very much to be nonpartisan. They're really advocating on climate issues. And I would point out that one of the groups in Congress that they interact with is called the Conservative Climate Caucus. And lo and behold, the person who is chair of that group is Marionette Miller Meeks, which you may not like all of her politics, but on the other hand, I would say this is an example of how we have to understand where people are coming from and learn how to work together towards some goals that we have some common interests in. You may not, again, you may not agree with, from the reaction, agree with all the political views, but nonetheless, they are trying to approach climate change issues. And I'd say in some ways that's a big step because for a long time, a lot of conservatives didn't even want to recognize that humans are causing climate to change. Charles Grassley has recognized that, although I get the sense he's done it begrudgingly. But nonetheless, so there is this group called Citizens Climate Lobby. And again, their website is one word, citizensclimatelobby.org. Those of you that want to work through faith communities, there's this group called, used to be called Iowa Interfaith Power and Light, and they've since changed their name to Iowa Faith and Climate Network. Carolyn talked about being stewards of the land. I would say that we're all called to be stewards of this great garden that we live in called planet Earth. And they have a number of activities coming up. In fact, just a week from tomorrow here at the Iowa Memorial Union, there'll be some activity called Workers on the Front Lines of a Hotter Planet, 2025 Iowa Labor and Climate Change, various other things they have going on that I could mention to you. One thing that might especially catch your attention is that on Tuesday, May 20th at the Englert Theater, Robin Wall Kimmerer, you may know about her work called Braiding Sweetgrass. And there's also a newer book called Service Berries. She's going to be speaking at the Englert Theater. It does cost a little bit of money. But also, if you feel like you do have some money that you want to put into things, I know the Iowa Faith and Climate Network is actually trying to develop things that I would call action projects within local churches, and they are gratefully accepting donations to help support that type of effort to get, again, reaching out to different communities to try to develop responses to climate change. I think oftentimes people, you're sort of alluding to this, Carolyn, people sort of throw their hands up in the air and say, my goodness, this is such a big issue, what can I do? Well, I think working together with your community is really the way to go, to where you're not by yourself, that you have people that you're working together with. And, you know, it goes back to that old environmental phrase, think globally but act locally. It is the same kind of thing. Work with your local communities, whoever that community is, and try to build some sense of cognitive ecology, as Linda called it, to move forward.
So this is the time where we want to turn this outward, and Catherine has a microphone for you to share some of the opportunities that you know about, since you are right here in Iowa City that you're hearing about. Certainly if there's questions that you or comments that you want to share, that's great too. But also this is really a time for us all to kind of gather together. So I'm going to turn this over to you all.
I'm going to declare something. I'm a screaming liberal, but I was also a banker. And I'm going to put a little different slant. Is there any work being done so that if you see something that's either going to save you money or make money, you get that out in the open? Because even if people are screaming anti-whatever, if they know they can save money or make money, and I look at the indigenous group people because they have so much to share, so much. If we developed a business, and I keep going, I'm sorry, but I will talk about business plans, I apologize. It's the evil side of me. If we develop business plans to help And my husband's Canadian, so I'm going to refer to First Nations, spent a lot of time in Canada, and Native Americans, how to sell their expertise and get themselves so they don't have so much poverty. Have we ever looked, and I know I was in it, and I'm sorry, but I got really wound up listening to you talk. I was listening to somebody that's good at agriculture, and they said that raising vegetables has a higher return than corn and beans. I don't know if that's true, but I've been thinking, is this still working? Why are we still raising corn and beans if we could just change everything and make more money? So I guess my idea is going backwards. Why are we taking anything as a business model approach? This saved us money. And I will give one example. In the bank, I did something really stupid. I thought. I just did it for efficiency. It saved the bank a lot of money. If you knew what it was, you'd laugh. And they were so happy with me. But it also saved a lot of environmental stuff. So that's my question. I guess that's my question.
I'll just quickly put this out there, and certainly Martha and Rosalind, if you have some from the kind of indigenous perspectives. One of the things, the map that you saw there, the Agricultural Conservation Planning Framework, part of that tool involves a financial tool that gives some brass tacks of that, and that's one of the things that we're moving into now that is part of our collaborations with some of the researchers on the team, is this particular tool because it provides the economics, which we think is absolutely crucial. So I'm really glad you brought that up, because that to me, I mean, as Carolyn was talking about, like, they have to make at least break even, if not at least somewhat support themselves. And of course, the farmers themselves need to as well. So thank you for bringing that up. That to me is crucial. I think there were other, Carolyn.
One thing I would quickly add to that, I mean, if we did not have the labor force in certain parts of the state to grow edible crops, they have to be handled differently. Then you have to figure out how far they have to be transported to get to a market, and you start to tickle. And then if you're growing next to a conventional farmer who is spraying their crops, and then you get contaminated right away, and then the price that you get, it's really complicated. But those are things that we do address all the time. We're constantly focusing on those issues.
So my question is, where are the current farmers going with farm chemicals to counter insects with the hotter climates?
Do you want to address it for some of the things you're doing?
For the yeah. Well, as far as fertilizers, I think we're making headway there. We're using more natural. My farm is fertilized with cattle manure, okay? You don't always have access to that, but that isn't your question. You were asking about insects and insecticides, and that's still a tough answer. I mean, I don't have an easy answer. It's still something that has to be dealt with, the pros and cons.
How are you working with the Farm Bill and to create different kinds of incentives to recognize some of the things that need to be done to improve the land? I mean, the Farm Bill was extended through September, so what groups are getting together? How can people interact and provide some additional input so it's not just done in Washington, D.C.?
We have had some of our partners go to Washington to be a part of providing feedback on the Farm Bill. Of course, things haven't been moving forward on that, but there has been work done in that area, specifically to provide feedback that will allow for more small growers to be a part of it, to do more practices, conservation practices that will support land health, soil health. And that's one of the things, too, that I'll just say that one of the things that we've been doing a lot with some of the programming that we do is that so much of the current system for farming is supporting a very traditional, lots of tillage, no cover crops, those kinds of things. And so to even move outside that is difficult for the landowner, for the farmers. And so we have these learning circles where we meet with folks over sometimes a year. Like Carolyn and I met for like 9 months, just like once every, 8 weeks type thing, just to sort of provide support for each other, because like how and when do you do certain kinds of cover crops? When do, is it a winter kill one? Is it one that you actually have to crimp or something so it's something that the whole system with crop insurance and everything and all the emphasis, every time you hear the word yield, how much something emphasizes yield on a farm, it's important that we start to turn the table on that and start thinking about profitability. Because of all the input that it takes, sometimes with all the different chemicals. So the systems are in place that support the traditional way of doing things that make it harder, Carolyn probably can speak better than I can, to move outside that system. But there's a lot of movement to try to create that, like the Women in Food and Ag Network.
There are quite a few organizations that,
I don't know if they want to.
did they say something?
I've been totally ignoring our screen, folks. Martha,
That's
please.
okay. I just wanted to mention something that related to a comment Bill had made earlier. So Citizens Climate Lobby, they do focus on legislation, and so in a former life, I was the Nebraska state climatologist, and I would go along with them and meet with federal lawmakers here in Nebraska, and we would talk about legislation that they would support. So if that's an area of interest for you, and I would consider joining Citizens Climate Lobby, your local chapter, or making them aware of the need to change legislation in the Farm Bill. I completely agree. It's because there is counter-cyclical payments. There's it's a very well-funded thing. The policy needs to be changed in order for the behavior to change. And so that mechanism of Citizens Climate Lobby might work for some of you that would have a particular interest in this area. And since I've gotten the floor, I'll just go back to a question. I think the opening question is regard to the economics and utilization of indigenous knowledges. And so there's a big effort in Indian country for tribal nation building, and it's something that is growing, and we've received training at the community college about it. You can actually get your specialization in business with tribal nation building, but it allows for the process and the framework for the community and the nation itself to decide what do they value and what would they like to make money off of. So for me, I think it's really important to start with what the nation values and what they're willing to profit from, because that might be different from nation to nation. And Rosalind, I don't want to say anything out of turn, so certainly correct me if I'm speaking off. So.
No, I agree. I definitely do. Just like what I kind of briefly brought up earlier, the adaptation plan, this is something that another tribe came up with. And this is, not only helping gas emissions lower, but is also creating money, sustainability within their economy and stuff. And, this is something that other tribal nations can start adapting. That's what I'm trying to get my tribal nation to adapt, so that we don't have to go through not being able to drink water out of our faucets, just climate effects basically.
Thank you. I'd like to thank you for having the indigenous voice here. We are seated here in the unceded land of the Sauk and Fox in the Meskwaki Nation. Nobody has given a land statement here today. I'm Mike Carberry. I'm with both the Sierra Club and the Iowa Farmers Union, and both the Sierra Club and the Iowa Farmers Union are working on the Farm Bill. I've been to DC twice in the last 2 months working on the Farm Bill. So there's a lot of people working on the Farm Bill in Iowa, including the Center for Rural Affairs, which is one of your sponsors. So there's a lot of farm groups, environmental groups, conservation groups working on the Farm Bill. The people in DC don't seem to care about it right now. They're kicking the can down the road. They seem to be caring about other things like tariffs or something I've heard of. I'm not sure what they are. But tell me about, there is one event coming up here next Wednesday, I believe. The Driftless Water Defenders are going to be having a speech here. Jim LaRue, co-founder of the Driftless Water Defenders, will be speaking here next Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock, I believe. Tom, is that the correct time? In this very room. And one of the things that Iowa is very famous for now is having the second highest rate of cancer in the nation and the only state that it is increasing. We had good news yesterday. The Cancer Gag Act did not proceed in the state legislature. So that's good news, and it's all about farming. Iowans and everybody needs to know where their food comes from and how their electricity is made. If we knew more about those things, we would be much better, the planet would be much better. But I'd like to ask the question about, we're talking about cover crops, you're talking about no-till. A lot of that is based on indigenous knowledge and in the ways that indigenous farming practices. You're talking about listening. How much have you listened to the tribal nations as you move forward in your projects? How much are you learning from the indigenous ways? Thank you.
Should we let them talk? I'd like to let them share. I'm learning a great deal, actually. And in my classroom, I bring in indigenous voices into my classroom. But I'd like to make sure that they speak.
I'd like to make just one quick comment, which hopefully they can tell us more about. It was alluded to in an earlier question that oftentimes tribal groups have been exploited for their knowledge. And I think part of that is making sure we truly recognize what they bring to the table and that the tribal groups benefit from it. I love the term First Nations up in Canada. I wish we could adopt that here. But anyway, I'm sorry. I had to throw that in.
Martha, do you want to share a little bit about how tribal nations are really, then that wisdom is helping to drive our approach and thoughts?
Yeah, I think I'll speak to some efforts going on at the college, and that is, for a long time we've had a Three Sisters garden and demonstrations. We've got 3 different campuses actually that compose Nebraska Indian Community College, and one on the Omaha Reservation and then one on the Santee Sioux Nation. So both of those, we have Three Sisters garden practices. We have a lot of local food production. We have prairie restoration efforts. We have greenhouses. We do have local energy production. So we've installed solar technology, so that allows for, I think, about 35% of our energy demands are locally produced. So there is a lot of work going on, both in the knowledge of nutritious food production, processing it, distributing it locally among the elders in the community. We have some trained chefs that are a part of the college. We have a director of Indianpreneurship, so not entrepreneurship, but Indianpreneurship. And he is a great advocate and delivers the message to maybe communities that wouldn't hear us otherwise, and fixes a meal and talks about food practices that are healthy for people and the environment. And so that's just kind of a broad brush overview, but we're really trying to have that be foundational in this new Indigenous Environmental Health degree, in fact, and have that be a core part of our curriculum, as well as directly serving the communities that we're in, both on the Omaha and the Santee Reservation, as well as the urban indigenous environment. So we have a campus in South Sioux City specifically for that. So that's just kind of an overview of the work that we're doing, and that's talked about and being shared among our partners. And so Rosalind, in fact, she is currently the greenhouse assistant, and she helped last year. We have aquaculture, and so there was fish that were harvested. So I'll be quiet and let you speak, Rosalind.
Yeah, so we are practicing, as holistically as we can, and I am just learning a lot of traditional ways to go about agriculture. It's something that I'm not quite an expert on, but I know general knowledge, and the general knowledge is that, you know, everything is connected, everything is interconnected. We have the soil, you know, from the plant to the air, from the humans, you know, what, you know, we're going to be the ones eating it, to the, you know, just everything. That's basically it all. And talking about exploitation, there is some things where you have to be considered that maybe indigenous people want to keep for themselves. It might be, you know, sacred seed, or, you know, seeds, or it could be just sacred knowledge. And that's fine if you're building trust and friendship, relationship, bonding with the indigenous people. You know, maybe one day that they will feel comfortable enough to share these, you know, holistic practices in agriculture. But from what I know, a lot of people are very open to it, because, you know, we want the whole earth to practice this way. And that's what I have to say about that. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Is this on still? I'm going to conclude our program there today, as we are already a few minutes over time and want to respect everyone's time this afternoon. Thank you so much, Rosalind and Martha, Bill, Carolyn, Linda, for your expertise, for joining us today, and for this interesting discussion to conclude our program. We hope to see you again next week here Friday the 11th at 12 noon for our program When Archives Meet Authoritarianism. Thank you all for being here today, and have a nice afternoon.